Welcome to beginner's class of Frocks and Frolics, just for you and Sue, and today we're going to sew Megan's dress and you're going to learn how to do really easy side pockets, insert a lining, easy way again, very easy hem, and of course satin stitch applique. Let's get started. First of all, you'll need 2 buttons, you need some cord if you want to make it in the same fabric as I did. You could also use denim, that would look very nice. And as my lining, I've chosen a cotton in a small polka dot in turquoise, but you could choose something different. You've got my Frocks and Frolics pattern, of course. You also need some scraps to make the little baby bird detail that you can see here, so whatever you fancy using. I've also used a little bit of yellow felt for the beaks. With your pattern comes an instruction sheet which shows you how the pattern is to be assembled, which makes it a little bit easier. And one thing I want to point out, because some people have been getting this wrong in the past, is that the attachment line that I give you is just to make it easier to put it together. Make sure that the notches, the balance marks, are actually on top of each other. And here we've got the front lining. The front lining is a little bit shorter and doesn't include the pocket, of course. That's why there is a separate pattern piece for the front lining. And this is the front, which has got the pocket on it, and it's that little bit of a round cutout. Now have a look at the pattern for the pocket. This is the pocket trim which goes on top, which we're going to be making first in this polka dot fabric. Then you've got the pocket lining which goes underneath it, and again we're going to make it in the polka dot. And finally you've got the pocket which just is slit underneath there, and we're going to cut that in cord. So altogether you have 3 pieces for your pocket. You also get an instruction as to how to cut out your dress, and you want to fold the selvages in on each other so you've got quite a lot of spare in the middle. But if you're using cord, you need to remember that it has a nap, so you need to cut into one direction and not upside down as I've done here, so you need to watch that. First we're going to cut out our front lining, and the front lining needs to be placed onto the fold, exactly onto the fold. Don't leave a seam allowance. You don't need it. The pattern has already got all of that included in it. And the same applies here to the back lining. Back lining is a bit longer because obviously where we would have the shoulder seams, this back comes to the front a bit. And because the lining in the back has to be a bit shorter, as you can see it says trim 2.5 centimeter, I do that straight away, so it's all done. And now both my linings will be the same length, and you can see that here. You also need to cut now the pocket lining. Make sure that you cut it with a grain. That means the arrow needs to be parallel to the selvage and that you end up with a pair. Now for the pocket trim, we need actually 4 of those, 2 pairs. For the cord, fold in the sides again so that you don't waste any fabric. Make sure again when you cut the other side that both of them are facing the same way, that the smooth way runs down your body. And look how much you've got left. In fact, out of a meter I can possibly get 2 if not 3 dresses. Take your pins out, and then final piece that we have to cut is our actual pocket, which goes underneath it and peeps out. And again, mind the arrow which shows you the grain, and the grain, like I just said before, it's parallel to the selvage. That's really important. But we begin by putting on our applique. Applique is quite an easy if time consuming thing to do. So the first thing is to cut these tiny fiddly little patterns out, and when you're cutting out, make sure that you move the paper don't move the scissor, and the same applies for when you're cutting out your fabric bits. It makes it easier. Then you put it on the dress where you want it, and you have to start with the beaks. Okay, so put it all on and then take everything off but the beaks and satin stitch, that is a buttonhole stitch, all the way around. So tension needs to be loose, and then you go. And I've done it here, so satin stitched it. Now I'm coming back and I'm putting my bodice on, and obviously after that, once that's satin stitched, I will do my little wing. When you do your satin stitch, you need to make sure that the center of your foot is also where you line up the edge of the fabric that you zigzag around, and then really move very slowly. You need to go a little bit and then move your presser foot up and then move it around, just so you can go always straight. Now the important thing, I found it easier to move the fabric round when the needle is on the inside zigzag, which means it's on the left inside the fabric when you turn your fabric round. That makes it a little bit easier and it looks a little bit nicer. But truth is, it takes a long time. Now for my feet, I used a triple stitch, which is number 18 on Janome machines, but you have to just find it on yours. And instead of just stopping at the end and then securing the thread, I'm just coming back on myself a little bit. And I've used about 5 stitches on the Janome. No, actually I used 6 stitches to come down. And then I used 3 stitches across to do the feet. And for the baby bird, I used 2 stitches across, and that really looks very nice. It makes it very thick and it looks almost like an embroidery, and I really like that. And here you can see the finished result. It's really quite nice. So you've only got the 2 threads to cut off. And finally I'm placing a pearl, or you could use a bead as well onto it. What's very important when you put on a bead for an eye, because this is for small children, you want to make sure that they're securely attached, which means going over and over and over. Kids tend to fiddle with things. The last thing you want is any child choking on something that you've made because they were able to get it off the garment and chew on it. So make sure that there's absolutely no way it can come off. Secure on the back, and your applique is finished, and I think it's just so lovely. I've really enjoyed doing it, although I have to admit that it did take me longer than making the dress, this applique. That's maybe because I don't do it very often, so you might be a lot faster than I was. For the eye of the little baby bird, what I did was actually I attached it around the outside, which is a little bit of a different effect, because if you've got a bead it just looks a bit silly if you do it any different. And that's finished, and I'm very proud of that. Now the next thing is that we take a pair of the trim for the pocket and we sew around the outside. Now the seam allowance here is only foot width, and you should just put the next one in straight away. And I thought I'd show you that here, because a lot of people take it out, cut off the threads and then start the new bit, and you want to cut down your sewing time as much as you can and get into really good habits. Now I want to show you what you're normally shown is that you cut out these triangles where you've got curves so that it turns better and it lies flat. And I'm now turning it and I'm ironing it, and I've done one where I've just cut it back and I haven't put these triangular cutouts on, and one with. And the surprise to you probably will be that the one which looks a bit more jaggedy, you can see it here, it goes from corner to corner, is actually the one that I've snipped properly, and the one where I just cut it back evenly on the other side, surprise surprise, is the one that looks a lot better. So this method is a bit of a myth and people will tell you to do it, but if you've got fairly lightweight fabric, just don't do it. It's not as nice, doesn't come out well, and I have no idea why people teach it. So what we want to do here now is pop this onto our pocket so the rough edges are on top of each other. I can't really get that wrong because there's no other way you can put them on. And we're going to use a triple stitch again around the outside, and I would sort of suggest maybe 2 millimeters off the edge. You need to find a fixed point on your presser foot that you are comfortable with, and then very slowly move your way around. I love the triple stitch, this backwards and forwards one that you use normally for jersey garments. I think it's absolutely great. Almost looks hand stitched, or it looks like a much thicker thread. Now we're going to put the pocket lining on, right sides facing on top of each other, so that we can then turn it to the inside like this. So right sides facing, pin it and sew around it, and again you can just do presser foot width. It doesn't have to be a centimeter here. If you did a centimeter, of course it doesn't matter, it's only a few millimeters difference. Snip those because we want to turn them and make sure that we have got the space. But again, I don't cut out these triangles, makes it actually harder. Then we want to press this really well. And the final step is then to place the actual pocket underneath it. So take your pocket, right sides facing down, and all you have to do is pin the edges together. The nice thing about this pocket is when we're sewing together the side seam, this works just a treat because you don't have to be fiddling with anything. It just makes it so easy to have a pocket which has got this round bit that actually goes into the dress. And you can see it here. I fixed it on either side as well so that it can't go anywhere, and I am now ready to put on my lining. So take your front lining, right sides down, and then you pin it around the top edge. So we're not sewing down or pinning down the lining on the side seam, just around the neckline and the armhole. Now I've sewn all the way around, and you guessed it, yes, we need to release the tension in all the curved areas here to make sure that we can turn it well. And here's one I made earlier. That's the front. I've also cut back on the rounded areas a bit more, and we can now turn it inside out. Make sure that we work out all the round areas so that they're really nice and smooth. Press it and we're good to go. So if you have got a label, you should also put that in, and if you are selling your garments, you need to make sure that you also have a fiber content label which you can put into the side seam. So I've pinned mine on there, and we're now going to just simply place the dress front here on the top of that, fold them apart so that we can have the lining and the upper shelf fabric on top of each other, so we can sew our side seam in one go. And you want to pin your underarm seam, so one seam allowance goes in one direction and one seam allowance goes in the other direction, so that it's really nice and flat. Also, you need to leave a gap just big enough to get your hand through, so that we can turn the dress inside out, because this dress does not require a serger. It's totally clean inside. So if you're selling your stuff on Etsy.com, for example, and you don't have a serger, then this is a brilliant way of doing it. So let's sew it all down. And oh, it's so easy on a video, isn't it? And so fast. So I've already done it. So now you want to snip back that underarm seam there a little bit so that it's not thick. And you iron the seam allowances. The top fabric, the shell fabric, always goes towards the back. You can't really do it another way because of the pocket, and the lining goes the other way. And make sure that you have actually left a gap that's big enough so you can get your hand through. And finally, all we have to do now is the hem. And this trick I'm going to show you now is really, really neat. So the lining is a little bit shorter by that 2.5 centimeter. So go onto the side seam, pull it out a bit, and then you want to turn both of them, the lining and the shell fabric, towards each other into the inside. So as you would normally do it, right sides facing, a centimeter in. And then you take one hand and you go inside and you grab that seam allowance and hold on to it. And then you turn the fabric out so that the seam allowances you're holding on to for dear life don't let go. And you can now pin those together, and you know that what you've just pinned is correct. It will feel wrong, especially if you do it the first time. You think, oh, this is all a bit twisted and etc. But it is right. It has to be right, doesn't it? You put right sides together on your side seam, then you pull the fabric out. I'm tucking the dress in here a bit, you can see that, and I'm pinning right to the other side seam and then all the way around. And it is twisted, but that ensures that when you turn it inside out, it's not twisted. So it looks kind of funny, but that's how it goes. So once you've sewn that, all you have to do is turn it inside out, and now it's just perfect. And you just need to just shake out your dress a bit and make sure that the hem is actually hanging down nicely there. Just pull it all out towards the hem, give it a good press, and you're ready to put your button on. So I needed to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, yeah, and then I do my first line, which goes all the way down, and now I'm going to go and press across as I hit that red line, and I come up the other side. It's actually not very difficult, but you should have a practice before you do this on your sewing machine. But most feet are like that these days, and some have automatic buttonholes as well, which is quite nice, although I'm not a fan of those, I'd have to say. I prefer the mechanical ones. And once you've done both buttonholes, you want to check which one is the nicer one. There's always one which looks slightly, not so nice. You could of course cut both of them open, but it's not really necessary. So I'm only going to cut one open, and I use my quick unpick for that. And you go right in there. Now the quick unpick I'm using is from Moorplan, so this is not very good Moorplan because it doesn't really cut. So I have to go and get my scissors to cut it, and I'm not going to buy these again. I bought a whole packet for my courses and none of them cut very well, so that's really disappointing. Right, now we're going to sew on the button, and I'm going to show you how to do this simply because some people don't know how to put a button on properly, and this is how. You want the button to sit on top, sort of like almost like it's floating on top. You do not want it to pull in all the fabric because it looks a bit forced then. So the way to do that, double thread, secured one end, come through, and then you want to put one of your fingers, could be your thumb, could be like my index finger here, underneath your button. Now you can buy gadgets for that, and people will say, oh yeah, you can get this fantastic gadget for this. Well, your finger will do the trick, so don't waste your money buying all these gadgets when you simply don't need them. There's plenty that you should spend your money on. The gadget for sewing a button on is not one of those. So again, go through quite a lot of times, because children's wear needs to be very secure. Buttons are something that a child can swallow, and so a button this size could be fatal. So I keep pointing this out on this video, but I want to make very sure you're aware and you do it really well. Wrap your thread around, and what you can see now is how the button kind of hovers over the top, and there's a little bit of a gap. That's what you want, because that gap is big enough now for the buttonhole which goes over the top. It's also got a thickness to it, and you want to accommodate that. And on the other side, I'm just putting a fakie on basically, because I only need to open one up to let the head through. In fact, you probably don't need, for most head sizes, you don't need to open up any of these. It'll just slide over, but sometimes it's easier to get your child dressed. Now we and there's that fantastic professional hem. So the pattern is available from my website, of course, frocksandfrolics.com or etsy.com and Craftsy, and the links to all of those are below the videos. So come on then, let's get sewing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.